Mr. Chairman, with your permission, if I may just say that in some ways the malice that prevails in this country is represented in this House as we speak.
आवाज साहब डिस्टर्ब हो रही हैं.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, there is the legal way of doing things, there is the constitution, there is how things are meant to be done, and there is how things are done. Now, legally and technically, the process that we're going through is the budget approval process. This House is the only entity mandated to be able to approve any penny of expenditure, be it for any entity and for all government expenditure. I do not see any presence from the Ministry of Finance which is worth mentioning. The people who are involved in the entire budget-making process, determining the priorities of this country's spending, I see no one represented, Mr. Speaker. And I feel that we are indeed now wasting the time and, frankly speaking, finances of this country, which is already finance-starved, by going through the processes and not being able to get anything, because Mr. Hamad Azhar Saab, हम बहुत सारे आपकी respect करते हैं, but you are Minister for Industry and you are, I know, not really involved with the budgetary making process. So you can appoint whoever you wish to appoint as advisors, but at least tell them to show some even fake respect to this House by attending to the suggestions which are coming from the Senate at this time.
Hina Rabbani Khar साहबा हमाद अजहर साहब मिनिस्टर बैठे हैं और आपके पॉइंट्स भी ले रहे हैं.
मिस्टर चेयरमैन साहब, आपके वालिद के साथ भी जी मैं कुलीग रह चुकी हूँ. आप बहुत respectable, you know how politics and the government works, and you know that the Minister of Industries has very little to do with it. So he's there in attendance and he's listening. But what I'm saying is, are we here just to talk and just to score points? I like to believe that our purpose in doing some homework and in making some points goes beyond just making points. I like to believe that all of us are here to contribute to a better resource allocation, Mr. Chairman, and that is what a budgetary process is all about, because the pie is limited and the weight on the pie, or the resources that are required to be able to fulfill all the urgent needs of this country and its population are far more. So I would like to believe that this should not be an exercise in futility. Now, Mr. Speaker, as I said, I will just concern myself with 4 specific, what I consider to be exceptionally important recommendations which have come from the Senate. And I will start with recommendation number 56. The Senate of Pakistan recommends to the National Assembly that all important debt agreements must be placed before the Parliament for scrutiny immediately. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister spoke ad nauseum about the debt situation of this country prior to his taking power and how the previous governments made the debt situation, gave him a debt burden that was impossible to deal with. Now, Mr. Speaker, I have over here the Economic Survey of Pakistan, annexures page number 59, which tells you that from 2012 to 13, because again, numbers में हमेशा कहा जाता है, hey, फिर होगी, आपने ये number किया, आपने वो number किया. Let's talk as a percentage of GDP. Debt servicing as a percentage of GDP, because that obviously none of us can, contest this number. It's an uncontestable number. So from 2012 to 13 till today, these are the figures that you've given. The debt servicing as a percentage of GDP was always in the range of 5.4 to 5.8 maximum. In your previous year, it was 8.1, and provisionally only up till March, it is 6.1. Now let's go to the specific numbers. Public debt, right? Because every government which has come has said that we are carrying the burden of the previous government. Every government which has come since ever I remember, since as long as I remember, says कि हम पे कर्जे छोड़ गए, हम तो इनके कर्जे बुकताते आगे. But numbers don't lie, Mr. Speaker. Certainly percentages don't lie, right? So I gave you a percentage of GDP which should be, I believe, the most pertinent, specific number, right? Now, if you want to go into the nominal figures, then आप कहते हैं कि जी आपने इतना डबल कर दिया. मानते हैं, आपको मैं बता देती हूँ, 2008 में जब पीपल्स पार्टी हुकूमत में आई, 6.1 ट्रिलियन था आपका टोटल पब्लिक डेट. Again, an uncontestable figure, coming from the Economic Survey of Pakistan, page number 171. 2013 में जब PMLN की हुकूमत आई, तो ये कर्जे जा चुके थे 14.2 ट्रिलियन पे. So from 6.1, they had gone to 14.1 trillion. Then in 2018, वो जा चुके थे 24.9 ट्रिलियन पे. Mr. Chairman, as we speak, up till March 2020, they have gone up to 35.2 trillion. That's an increase of 11 trillion rupees in the last year plus, in the last less than 2 years. So the context of what we say is exceptionally important. Therefore, this recommendation of the Senate, I fully endorse it, Mr. Speaker, and our party endorses it for the reason that taking on debt must be for the benefit of the poor of this country, for the citizens of this country. Another interesting detail, which frankly speaking I couldn't find the figure in any of the documents which are available with us, is that a lot of loans are taken in where you have to pay commitment charges without the loans being utilized. Hamad Sahab? I'm speaking about the commitment charges that we end up paying. And if in your winding up, if you can tell us what is the total quantum of commitment charges that Pakistan is paying on loans which have been committed by the ADB and the World Bank and many other multilateral and bilateral institutions. However, you are never able to utilize those loans, and do you know what happens? Without using that money, you end up paying interest on it, and on top of paying interest on unutilized loans, you actually also end up paying commitment charges in millions of dollars. Mr. Chairman, I believe this country can't afford that. Therefore, every document, every loan document, as this recommendation number 56 says, must be placed before the Parliament. I think the Parliament is best placed to be able to scrutinize it and to be able to make sure that it fits within the priority list of this country. Mr. Speaker, the second recommendation I would like to talk about in certain detail is the Senate of Pakistan recommends to the National Assembly that the budgetary allocation of Higher Education Commission should be enhanced to 100 billion. Mr. Speaker, again, an exceptionally important point. For the simple reason, Mr. Speaker, that we, in the resource allocation that we do, we demarcate what will determine the future of this country. We demarcate which direction do you want this country to take. Do you want to ensure that the youth bulge is an educated youth, one which is a source of progress and development to this country, or a youth which does not have access to education even if they want it, right? So clearly we are all on the same page, all members of Parliament, all parties, that Higher Education Commission and higher education is something that they should get adequate resource allocation. Now let me tell you the reality, Mr. Speaker, and again these are coming from figures which are in the economic survey, or demands for grants for appropriation. Mr. Speaker, I saw something which I have never seen in documents, in government documents. On page number 71 of demands for grants and appropriation, on the heading of under the head of HEC, Mr. Speaker, there is no actual expenditure for 2018-19 given. It's a blank column. There is no budget estimate of 2019-20 given. Again, a blank column. No revised estimate for 2019-20 given. Blank column. And then there is 2020-2021 budget estimate of 64 billion. I just fail to understand how is that even possible for something like this to be printed. This looks like exceptionally irresponsible behavior. So I go back and try and figure out what the numbers were, Mr. Speaker, and you find out from previous economic service. First of all, Mr. Speaker, I want this House to take notice of this, because you cannot place documents in front of this House which are empty, which are half-filled. And we would want an explanation to this. Page number 71, demands for grants and appropriations. Mr. Speaker, we find out that in 2019-20 जो नया पाकिस्तान बनाने वाली हुकूमत जब आई, तो 2018-19 में जो the HEC asked for 103.5 billion as its allocation. The HEC was told that they could only be allocated 58 billion. That is half of what the HEC asked for. Interestingly, that happens to be even less than what the PMLN government had allocated to the HEC in the previous year. Unbelievable, does it not seem? This doesn't look like the right priority that you want to pursue. Then you find out that in the development budget also, they were only given 29 out of the 55 billion that they had asked for. And the actual allocation was about 29.47. Mr. Speaker, this year too, as I'm showing you from this document, the allocation that has been made is 64 billion rupees. This is clearly not in line with the requirements, Mr. Speaker, and therefore you have the chairman HEC who was left with no option but literally to go out and give interviews and say that I do not have money to give to pay salaries. Is this what your commitment to the education of the poor, of the youth of this country, Mr. Speaker? Terrible, terrible, terrible choices we're making over here.
And for which Shafqat Mahmood was...
And yes, and here we have to sit through the Prime Minister praising Mr. Shafqat Mahmood for his unginned services to the field of education. Mr. Speaker, yehi hai. This is the problem. Your words must match your action. We are not going to judge you by your beautiful words. We are going to judge you by the prioritization that you do that is reflected in these official documents that you have placed in front of us. Perhaps you thought we'd never go through these documents. That's the best excuse I can come up with. Mr. Speaker, uske baad, you have on the third recommendation I would like to spend some time on is that the Senate of Pakistan recommends to the National Assembly that a realistic tax collection target should be set instead of 4.9 trillion as set by the FPR. Mr. Chairman, it is embarrassing to this House that the budget, that documents that were placed in front of us and the estimates that were given, we were off them by 30%, Mr. Speaker. And I am embarrassed once again to say that we are going to repeat that history again and make the same mistake again. Now, can I tell you the repercussions, the ramifications when you do a thing like this? When you make these very unrealistic estimates and hand them over, and then they expect us as a rubber stamp to pass them. Because clearly rubber stamps, we all are and are expected to be. But Mr. Speaker, मैं आपको इसकी एक छोटी indication देती हूँ as to what ramifications does this have. First of all, कहा गया, हमने तो नया टैक्स ही नहीं लगाया. हमने किसी किस्म का नया टैक्स नहीं लगाया. और फिर हमाद साहब आपने अपनी स्पीच में ये कहा कि हमने अवाम की खातिर, कोविड की खातिर अवाम को 47 रुपीज़ डीजल कम किया. आप हमें बेवकूफ़ समझते हैं? क्या इंटरनेशनल प्राइसेस ऑयल की 70 को छू रही थी और वो 0 पे भी आ गई और 20 पे भी गई और 30 पे भी गई और अभी 40 की रेंज में? क्या हमारी ये कमिटमेंट नहीं थी तमाम हुकूमतों की? हम सारे कहते रहे जी ओगरा डिटर्मिन करता है, हम तो पास ऑन कर देते हैं. तो क्या आपको ये जेब देता है कि आप एक पेट्रोलियम लेवी में 2019-20 में आपने एस्टिमेट किया हुआ 216 बिलियन, आपका रिवाइज एस्टिमेट में आप कमा लेते हैं 260 बिलियन. And if I'm not mistaken, this is not even part of the divisible pool, right? This goes directly to the federal government. Then, very smartly, for this budget, you have an allocation or an estimate of 450 billion rupees. I thought you were not adding no new taxes. So where is this 200? Where's the doubling of the petroleum levy coming from? So, Mr. Speaker, जब naturally दुनिया में oil की price crash करती हैं, आपकी आवाम इस वक्त पिसी हुई है. आप बजाय उसको कि उनका आप उसको फ़ायदा दें, क्योंकि आपके रेगुलेटरी सिस्टम रिजीम ये कहती है कि जो पास होएगा आप आगे दे देंगे, ओगरा डिटर्मिन करेगा आप आगे दे देंगे. आप आवाम से इस वक्त भी खाएंगे, आप उनको नचोड़ेंगे. I think this is bad politics, Mr. Speaker. This is bad government and this is bad politics. And I would recommend that we not resort to such things, or at least not do it as sheepishly as do. If you have a viewpoint, if you believe you can justify it, you should openly say कि जी हमने 260 अरब रुपए हम टैक्स की मद में यहाँ से आए. Mr. Speaker, I was trying to make a case for wrong assessments, wrong estimates. Now, when you make an unrealistic estimate that you're going to make 4.9 trillion in taxes, what happens is that there is this thing called the divisible pool, right? Mr. Speaker, जो बच्चे कुछ वाले लोग रह गए, if they can just pay attention to, please, these recommendations are coming from the Senate. I'm sorry, the 5 people of the Treasury benches which are still represented over must at least take this slightly more seriously.
Order in the House, please.
Mr. Chairman, I was just trying to give you an indication of how this creates a whole dominoes effect of wrong planning, of wrong prioritization. So when the federal government says, Kiji, we will be able to collect 4.9 trillion, what happens is there's something called divisible taxes. And then Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Punjab, Sindh, everybody makes an assessment from there, what is their share, right? And one of them thinks their share is going to be 281, the other thinks that it's going to be 507, the Punjab thinks it's going to be 1.6 trillion, Sindh thinks it's going to be 761 billion. And guess what? You're not able to collect you're only able to collect 70% of those taxes, and what happens with all of the provincial expenditure, Mr. Speaker? So that's why your budget-making process has to be a realistic process. It cannot be a pie in the sky. It has to be based on fact, not fantasies. And is it not true that you actually missed your targets by 30%? And in this COVID times, the Prime Minister has agreed with everyone else that these are going to be harsh times. By saying that you're adding no more taxes, are you expecting incomes of people to increase so much that your tax pool is suddenly going to increase? So I think, Mr. Speaker, this is a very, very unrealistic assessment, and therefore I fully concur with the views of the Senate and support the recommendation that the assessment of the target should be realistic. Mr. Speaker, the fourth and the last point which I would like to speak a little bit about is recommendation number 85, which says the Senate of Pakistan recommends to the National Assembly that government should raise the amount of funds allocated for locust control in 2020-2021 from 4 billion to 8 billion, keeping in view of the losses suffered by our small farmers in the locust-affected areas. Mr. Speaker, again, if we were to base our assessment of this government by the words they speak, we would all be very happy. Because the Prime Minister stood here and said that his government was very aware that in these times, agriculture is an exceptionally important area. And when, because of COVID, everything else is being deeply affected, agriculture is what requires a lot of attention. Mr. Chairman, however, what we do see is that President Zardari over here, last year in the budget, during his budget speech, warned us about locust. And we see no prioritization. Yes, you may have authorized somebody to spend so much money, but what effect has that had? Are the provinces not telling you they do not have the airplanes which the federal government was supposed to send their way for this particular purpose? And if that is still not being done, then what confidence are we supposed to have in your resource allocation or, attending to this very, very important issue? Mr. Speaker, if you want to get a sense of how important agriculture is and how much it has been neglected, again, I will go back to their own figures of how agriculture has performed. Because as I said, we can't rely on how good your intentions are. We have to see how good your work is. Unfortunately, your work gives us very little to be thankful for, especially in the agriculture sector. So if you look at their performance, Mr. Chairman, in financial year 2019, crops have actually seen a negative trend of 4.9%. Important crops of a negative 7.6%. Cotton ginning of negative 12.7%. Mr. Speaker, I do not remember another year in our country's history where we have posted such negative growth. And for this particular year, provisionally, we are expecting, mashallah, 2.9% growth in agriculture. Isn't that much to celebrate over? That this agrarian-based economy will perhaps see a 2.9% growth. And even in this year, we have a negative 4.6% growth in cotton ginning. And Mr. Speaker, I think it is unprecedented. We have never done very well in cotton. Cotton is supposed to be exceptionally important. We all agree that if you were to choose between sugar and cotton, this country deserved to have chosen cotton many, many years back. But we can still realign that priority. In this particular year, Mr. Speaker, I believe 9 million bales is all we could do. Now that, to my living memory, is perhaps the worst performance. And our fear is that if you continue to ignore this locust problem to the proportion that you have ignored in the last year, we will see even a worse crop. So, Mr. Speaker, I lay these recommendations of the Senate and my my recommendation or analysis of that with the full knowledge that nothing is going to come out of it. I think that's a sad, sad reality, which was perhaps always true for the Parliament, Mr. Speaker, but this reality has become one that faces us in the face in a very, very, in a very crude manner during the PTI government. And Mr. Speaker, as I say, please, मैं आपको चेयरमैन साहब मैं आपसे ये इल्तिजा करूंगी, ये होता रहा है कि अगर फाइनेंस मिनिस्ट्री से लोग नहीं आए हुए, हाउस की प्रोसीडिंग्स रोक के आप उनको बुलाएं जी, हम लोग यहाँ पे काम करके, our job is not to watch ourselves on television speaking these things. We can go to our houses and make these speeches. The idea is that we should be able to get something out of it for the people of Pakistan.
फाइनेंस से आए हुए हैं लोग.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, sorry, but कौन आए हुए हैं जी? What level? I don't see the finance secretary over here. I'm sorry, that person will not qualify. Because he's worked under me, I know what his duties are in the finance ministry.
डॉक्टर साहब आप बताएं जी. मैं लिस्ट मंगा लूँ।
मिस्टर स्पीकर, मिस्टर चेयरमैन, मैं सिर्फ आखिरी आपसे ये कहना चाहूँगी मिस्टर स्पीकर, मिस्टर चेयरमैन, ये पार्लियामेंट ऑफ पाकिस्तान है, यहाँ पे माली साल का बजट पेश नहीं बल्कि मंजूर होने जा रहा है, राइट? इफ द एडवाइजर ऑन फाइनेंस एंड द सेक्रेटरी फाइनेंस कैनॉट फाइंड इट वर्थ देयर व्हाइल to sit here during this time, I genuinely think we should wrap this up and perhaps not waste our time, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman, sir.
थैंक यू जी। हमाद अज़हर साहब इस पे रिस्पॉन्ड करें जी। बात तो इनकी ठीक है कि इस वक्त हमारे फाइनेंस सेक्रेटरी और सेक्रेटरीज को यहाँ पे होना चाहिए था।
बिल्कुल यहाँ पे बैठे हैं जी 3 लोग जो बैठे
सेक्रेटरी
हैं
लेवल के
फाइनेंस डिवीजन से बैठे हैं, बजट विंग के इंचार्ज भी
नहीं
बैठे
है,
हैं
किस लेवल के बैठे हैं यहाँ
और
पे?
अभी कुछ देर पहले तक फाइनेंस सेक्रेटरी साहब भी खुद यहाँ पे बैठे थे गैलरी के अंदर।
दोनों को बुलाएं और यहाँ पे बिठाएं
बुला लें
अभी जी।
फाइनेंस सेक्रेटरी साहब
अभी उनको कहें कि 10 मिनट के अंदर लॉबी में होना चाहिए।
मे बी ही इज स्टिल इन द हाउस, क्योंकि वो भी थोड़ी देर पहले तक तो फाइनेंस
अगर नहीं है तो सुबह उनको लॉबी में बुलाएं, बिठाएं जी। अदरवाइज सुबह उनको जो है ना स्पीकर चैम्बर्स में आए जी।
बिल्कुल ठीक है, बिल्कुल बुलाएं जी।
जी चौधरी फकीर अहमद साहब जी।
ये 147 बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। जनाब चेयरमैन, बहुत शुक्रिया